are on the Commonwealth rent assistance payments, the maximum rate will increase. It will go up 10% on top of a 15% increase last year. This the first back-to-back increase in more than 30 years. The government pledging an additional $1.9 billion over 5 years to support this. For families with children, the increases are an additional $70 per fortnight. This change will come into effect from September 30. Now, students are also major winners out of this budget. The government is set to reduce student debt by $3 billion, supporting over 3 million Australians. This reduction stems from changes to the Higher Education Loan Program indexation rate, which will now align with the lower figure between the Consumer Price Index and the Wage Price Index. The indexation rate shift from 7.1% to 3.2% in the latter half of 2023 and from 4.7% to 4% in 2024 marks a significant change. To put this in perspective, a former student with an average help debt of $26,500 can expect a credit of $1,190 to their account due to the new indexation policy. Overall, this adjustment will reduce the total debt by approximately $1,600 for such individuals. The government will also introduce an independent ombudsman to settle disputes between students and universities. There's also a Commonwealth prac payment. This sees up to $319.50 per week for students during their placements, and it's in an attempt to combat placement poverty. That will kick in during 2025.
Spikes in inflation have exposed a flaw in this system and put young people under unfair pressure. We are fixing that and we're changing that so that it won't happen again. We're capping indexation of student loans. It will wipe $3 billion in student debt for over 3 million Australians and save the average person around $1,200.
On to health, something many people fork out thousands of dollars on per year. The federal government will impose 2 price freezes on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, also known as the PBS. Firstly, one freeze starting on January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025. It will see the maximum payment for prescriptions halted at $31.60, the current maximum. A second freeze will apply between January 1, 2025 and January 31, 2029 for concession card holders, including pensioners, which means prescription prices will be capped at $7.70 until 2030. This will cost the budget $318 million over 5 years from 2023-24.
But 6 out of 10 PBS scripts go to pensioners and concession card holders, and we will freeze the cost of their medicines for 5 years, meaning no pensioner, no concession card holder will pay more than $7.70 for the medicine that they need. We're also investing $3.4 billion to add life-changing and life-saving medicines to the PBS, cutting the cost of one breast cancer treatment from around $100,000 to $31.60. Speaker, we know that Australians are feeling the pinch at the checkout. That's why we empowered the competition watchdog to hold supermarkets accountable. That's why we're taking steps to make the food and grocery code mandatory and making our economy more competitive across the board by strengthening the mergers regime and abolishing nuisance tariffs and reducing compliance costs for business. $6.2 billion in new investments mean our $32 billion Homes for Australia plan will clear local infrastructure bottlenecks, provide more housing for students, fund more social and affordable housing, and we'll also deliver better transport for better access to suburbs and cities and regions. Our $22.7 billion Future Made in Australia package will help make us an indispensable part of the global net zero economy, a crucial part of a growth agenda which is all about attracting investment in key industries.
Now, we are told the budget is all about keeping inflation down, but that's up to the RBA to decide, and we hear from the RBA next on June 18. So that's everything you need to know from the budget for every Australian, as the Treasurer put it. A lot of winners from this, in particular with tax cuts for basic poor.
But 6 out of 10 PBS scripts go to pensioners and concession card
time when it's needed most.
That is 6 News for now. You can stay up to date by heading to our website or by following us on social media at 6NewsAU. News is on the hour every hour here on 6 News. For now, I'm Darby Travers. Take care.
It's an interview you do not want to miss.
And most people, even Labor voters, agree that things have got a hell of a lot worse. And the second part of that is who's got the right priorities for Queensland's future.
Coming up just months away from the state election in November, we speak with the state opposition leader David Christofouli about his plans for the LNP.
I want Queenslanders to vote for change, and in order to do that, they have to vote for the LNP.
And we ask the questions you want answered. Do you support the Gabba coming down or upgrades to it? Your approval rating is on par with Stephen Miles compared to Anastasia Palaszczuk. Why do you think that is?
Uncensored, streaming now on the 6 News YouTube channel and our website, 6newsau.com.
From the moment you get up, 6 News has you covered. We'll keep you informed with what's happened overnight, both here at home and overseas, and let you know what to expect right throughout the day.
Extraordinary scenes overnight.
Going to be a big day.
The news starts here every morning on 6 News.
On 6 News, we bring you the latest headlines and breaking stories live. Our team of journalists are on the ground across the country and around the world, keeping you informed with up-to-the-minute reporting every single day.
Top of the hour, every hour.
Thanks for joining us.
So in 2024, turn to 6 News, on the hour, every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 366 days of the year. For live, up-to-the-minute, impartial coverage of everything happening in Israel and Gaza, turn to 6 News. Bringing you the latest developments on air and online 24/7.
Though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it.
Solidarity and support on America's behalf.
Pro-Palestine rallies took place.
Special coverage from here at home and overseas, on the hour, every hour, right here on 6 News.
I have 15 questions for you. I have actually divided them into multiple categories, so a bit of a choose your own adventure. So your categories are the Constitution, elections, prime ministers, parliament/government, and political parties.
Start off with parties.
After objections from the Liberal Party over similarities in name, what was the original name of the party that had to change it and is now registered as the initials TNL?
The New Liberals.
Correct. What category would you like next?
I think we'll go with elections.
Before 2010, when was the last time we had a hung parliament?
It seems to have been a while, because I know Howard managed to get some pretty good majority governments in his years. I want to say 1993.
Oh, no, the answer is 1940. Which state has had the most prime ministers born there?
Surely New South Wales.
That is correct. Yes, there is a big bias towards New South Wales peoples becoming Prime Minister. Pokemon Go was mentioned repeatedly in 2019 during debate of a bill on what subject? A. Agricultural protection, B. Data management regulations, C. Copyright law, or D. Live animal exports?
God, I'm glad you gave me the multiple choice. Animal exports?
Oh, no, actually it was A, agricultural protection. The media nicknamed this the vegan terrorist bill.
Minister, this is around the issue of whether players of games like Pokemon Go might find, or I should say creators of games like Pokemon Go might find themselves in breach of this legislation.
Chasers of Pikachu are safe.
You should know this. What age can people enrol to vote in Australia?
16.
Correct.
First thing I'm doing on my birthday this year, I already know that.
What is your next category?
Can we go to political parties?
Which of the following is not a real political party from Australia's history at any point? A. Home Rule OK. B. Like Canberra. C. Flat Tax Now. D. Taxi Operators Political Service.
Well, I did a big A to Z list on these, which which took a while and is still continuing to be updated. I'm going to go with the only one that doesn't ring a bell to me, which is C.
That is correct. I'm glad you got that because I did use that list you made to make that question. A genuinely massive list, and I appreciate the resource. I'm all about useful searchable resources, so thank you for that. Which category would you like next?
Probably my weakest point, but I got to have at least one question for it. Let's go Constitution.
How many times is the title Prime Minister mentioned in the Constitution?
Gonna get a random number out because I'm thinking it's either gonna be huge or it's gonna be low ball. I'm gonna low ball it 6.
Oh no, the answer is actually 0. The Prime Minister is a position that's arisen out of convention from Westminster Parliaments. It has no constitutional basis. It's not a constitutional role. The Governor-General acts in advice of Council and can appoint Ministers of State, which by convention means the Prime Minister. True or false? Only Australian citizens can vote in Australian elections.
I have a strong hunch there's some technicality on this one, but yet I feel like it's true. That's not an answer yet. Don't hold that in yet. Australian citizens, I'm gonna say true.
False, actually. The law changed in 1984, so British subjects who are enrolled to vote before then are still actually eligible and required to vote if they have permanent residency. Mark Latham, the former leader of the Labor Party, is now a member of the One Nation Party. However, which political party was he briefly a member of in between those two?
Liberal Democrats.
Correct. Where in the chamber would an independent or minor party member sit?
Smack bang around in the middle of the crossbench.
Correct. Pauline Hanson has been a member of how many parties and what are their names?
I'll be thinking out loud here. Well, one, Liberal. That's definite one. That's kind of the whole reason she's still around today. 2, her own party. Pauline Hanson's One Nation. 3, Pauline Hanson's United Australia Party, which is a really weird one that, I think has been lost to history and I can't believe existed. I'm going to lock in 3, Liberals, One Nation, Pauline's UAP.
That is correct. Which of the following is an acceptable thing to use when marking your ballot? A, pencil, B, pen, C, crayon, D, highlighter, E, all of the above.
I know pen and pencil are, so it's gonna have to be all of the above.
That is correct. The rules is that your ballot must be clearly marked. If there is a utensil that you can use that will clearly do that safely and not smudge, then you may use it. Which political party in Australia has had the longest continuous stint in office on a state, territory or federal level? A, Labor, B, Liberal, C, Nationals, D, United Australia Party.
Federally, it's Liberals. When you include the state element, that's that throws a spanner in the works. I'm just going to go for it and say Liberal.
No, close, but it's actually Labor. Tasmania had a Labor government for 34 years and 11 months. And then it had a Liberal Premier for about nearly 3 years, and then it was Labor again for I think like 9. Tasmania really did vote Labor for a long, long time. True or false, the Liberal Party has never formed a majority government by itself in the ACT. I'll give you like a little bit of help here. The Nationals do not exist in the ACT, so it would be the Liberals by themselves or not.
I know there's been a couple majority governments, very rare though, in the ACT. I'm going to say true.
False. The Liberals have never had a majority in the ACT. They have had two sections of government in the ACT, two time periods, both of which they've relied on the support of minor parties. Parliament, the federal parliament, did not always sit in the current Parliament House building that it is in now. Where did it originally sit after federation for the first couple of decades?
Well, would it be Melbourne?
It would be Melbourne. That is correct. The Constitution was agreed upon by the states of Australia by a series of referendums that approved whether or not that colony would join the Federated Australia. Which state did not hold its referendum until after the Constitution had been signed by Queen Victoria and the British Parliament?
WA?
That is correct. Western Australia actually did not join Federation until after the Constitution was signed, but just in time before it came into effect in 1901. Your next question, actually, I think this is the final question, your 15th question, maybe. What would you like your final category to be?
Let's try to finish off strong with something I know and go with parties.
Which of the following political parties was not made by someone who defected from a different political party? I don't necessarily mean that they were an elected member, because party membership is a thing that anyone can have before they get elected. A. Shooters, Fishers and Farmers. B. Australian Democrats. C. Australian Conservatives. D. The United Australia Party, the historic one with Robert Menzies and the predecessor to the Liberal Party. Or E. The United Australia Party, the unrelated contemporary party by Clive Palmer.
I know Palmer was a member of the LNP and probably the Queensland Liberals before the merger, so rule him out. The UAP came about, the old one, through another one of those nowadays Liberal Party predecessors, the Nationalists. The Australian Conservatives, Bernardi, Liberal. The Australian Democrats, Don Chipp, Liberal. So to be Shooters Fishers.
That is correct. Yes, that is a good amount of knowledge. I'm very impressed. Congratulations, you've got most of them correct. I don't actually remember how many you did get correct because I forgot to mark that down. And I'm here to be challenged on my Ozpol knowledge by someone half my age. With me right now via Zoom, I have perhaps the most engaged 15-year-old I've ever met, who runs Channel 6 News, an independent news channel on YouTube, helping you understand what's going on in Parliament. Please introduce yourself.
Leo Puglisi, founder of 6 News Australia, independent unbiased news outlet, and on a personal level, a bit of an Ozpol nerd. So, you know, that's why I'm here, and yeah, that's why I also watch your content to give you a plug on your own show, which is a bit of a weird thing to do, but I wasn't paid to say that.
Do I actually know what I'm talking about for Australian politics and history? We're about to find out.
So first question I've got, if the voice referendum is successful, it would mean how many referendums in Australia have passed total?
If it succeeds, it'll be the 9th to succeed.
Correct. The 1914, 1951, 74, 75, 83, 87 and 2016 Senate elections all have what in common?
Were they all double dissolutions?
Yep, exactly. Who is the current Speaker of the House?
Oh, I'm going to pass on that one. I do not know. I cannot guess.
Milton Dick. So the Queensland Labor MP, Speaker Dick, you know, he's the, as of June 2022. In order of longest time in office for Prime Ministers, it goes Menzies, Howard, Hawke, and then who?
Malcolm Fraser.
Correct. The marriage equality plebiscite was introduced by which government?
The coalition government under Malcolm Turnbull.
Yep. Similar to the question about longest time in office, the shorter serving PM was who?
Frank Ford, who served for 1 week. Some people say 8 days or 7 days, depending on how you count it.
I think 7 days is generally accepted, regardless. Shortest by a good couple of weeks. The only state, so not including territories here, the only state without an upper house is what state?
Queensland, which they abolished in 1922.
I think they called it the Suicide Squad when voters voted to abolish their own chamber. So, that's weird, but they'll probably never get it back, even though governments like to flip on that. How many parties are currently part of the Federal Liberal National Coalition?
4.
Correct.
Would you like me to list them?
Go ahead. Why not?
There's the Liberal Party, there's the National Party, and then there's the Liberal National Party, which is in Queensland specifically, where they fused, and then Northern Territory provides the Country Liberal Party, which sometimes gets federal representation.
And currently has federal representation as well with Jacinta Price. Of course, she sits with the Nationals. Gough Whitlam was dismissed in what year?
1975.
Correct. The only party that contested the first ever federal election, so 1901, that currently exists is what party?
The Australian Labor Party, the oldest continuous political party in Australia.
Yeah, and I think they were going with the old, arguably correct spelling back then as well, Labou. But of course they don't now. Who is the current Father of the House, oldest serving member in the House of Reps?
That would be Bob Katter. I was like, I can see, I knew his face. I was like, I'd literally have his biography right next to me somewhere. I was like, what is his name? It's Bob Katter. That's it.
Bonus points. This isn't a question I actually had planned. Do you know who the second, who's next in line Father of the House in the House of Reps?
Currently?
Yeah.
No, I don't actually.
Anthony Albanese.
He was voted in was it 96?
That sounds about right. It was after Keating was gone, I believe. So 1996 sounds about right. But I'll check on that. But he definitely is next in line for Father of a House, although Katter doesn't seem to be gone for a while. The Nationals used to be known as the what party?
The Country Party.
Correct. How many branches in the is the federal government split into?
How many branches is the federal government split into? The three separation of powers, the executive, judiciary, and legislature.
Yep. So that'd be...
So the legislature is Parliament, which makes the laws. The executive is the Prime Minister and Cabinet advising the Governor-General on behalf of the King, and the judiciary is the court system, so High Court, etc., which would rule on matters of the Constitution and is the last court of appeal in Australia.
Correct. If a senator, you might have to do maths here, if a senator was elected in 2019, what year would their term expire?
2025.
Correct, assuming no double dissolution, as we mentioned before. And finally, the only state or territory that currently has a coalition government of any kind is what?
See, this is a nice little one that you're trying to trick me off with, and I'm going to argue with technicality. The ACT it's technically not a coalition with Labor and Greens. It's an alliance in that I believe they don't actually need to vote together inherently in the same way that the Liberal National Coalition does. But the ACT is the only place with a minority government in support with a minority party. So that's Labor with support of the Greens partially, but there are some Greens outside of that. Tasmania is, I think, the one that people are that would come to people's minds because that is the last blue state. That's the Liberals. But there are no Tasmanian Nationals, so it is not a coalition government.
Yeah, correct. The Tassie Nationals have barely had any presence over the years. You're right, though, on the Greens. It's an even split. I believe 3 Greens ministers and 3 Greens crossbenchers who are weirdly separate. So it's a bit of a confusing situation, but it's the Greens make up a full third of the ACT ministry. So I think you got, I didn't do the maths, but I think you got a good 90% of them correct if I had to guess. So did pretty well there.
Well, thank you very much to Leo Puglisi for joining me on the channel and testing my knowledge. If you'd like to see how well he did, you can head over to Channel 6 News Australia, where I also have a quiz for him as well. Their YouTube channel and socials are linked below. I do recommend check them out. Thank you so much to those who support me on Patreon. And also, if you're going to go check out Channel 6 News, they also have a Patreon. Maybe you can support them as well. Keep journalism alive, independent, and, you know, some sort of media source that isn't owned by Rupert Murdoch. Unless there is a giant merger coming your way. If Rupert Murdoch or any other billionaire is watching, I do have a tier on my Patreon. Most people choose $1 or $2, but I do have an option for $3,000 per video, which is not a joke. If you sign that up to that, I will charge you $3,000. So please only do that if you are a millionaire or billionaire. But if you are a no one, just send that over to them.
On 6 News, we do politics differently.
Welcome to Uncensored.
Thanks for having me on your wonderful program.
Are you confident that you can defeat David Chris-Fully?
From long-form unedited interviews to taking a deep dive into Australian law and governance.
Sure. May. That's when you recant the respect for Indigenous Australians. Why axe them?
Well, it's certainly heating up outside here in Brisbane, and it will be heating up inside Parliament right now.
6 News understands talks about removing Palaszczuk have been ongoing.
The Health Australia Party has warned they may shut down.
Do you stand?
I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Tonight I want to outline part of my vision for Australia to get our country back on track, to keep our nation safe and secure, to make life easier and better for all Australians, because this Labor government has made life so much tougher for Australians, because this Labor government has set our country on a very dangerous course. Almost 2 years ago, Prime Minister Albanese was elected promising a reduction of $275 each year in your power prices, cheaper mortgages, and that you would be better off under a Labor government. All of those promises have been broken. And this government has been focused on the wrong priorities. It started with the Prime Minister's Voice referendum. Not only did it waste $450 million, which could have helped families with the cost of living pressures that you're now facing, the referendum also divided our nation. And let's not forget that the Prime Minister called no voters chicken littles and doomsayers. Today, millions of Australians are struggling to pay their bills. Even going to the supermarket and petrol station has become stressful for so many. Prime Minister, Australians are genuinely hurting under your government, and they're not chicken littles. Electricity bills haven't gone down by $275, as was pledged on 97 occasions. They've skyrocketed. The Treasurer will give you a $300 rebate, but he knows full well that your annual electricity bills have increased, in some cases by up to $1,000 since Labor formed government. Interest rates have gone up on 12 occasions under Labor, and a typical Australian household with a mortgage is $35,000 worse off. And that's if you're lucky enough to own a home. Under this Prime Minister, the great Australian dream of home ownership has turned into a nightmare. Even finding somewhere to rent is near impossible. Now, the government has brought in an additional 923,000 migrants in just 2 years. On the available data, the government has only contributed 265,000 new homes and units to accommodate those people. And then, of course, there's Labor's tax on the family car and ute. You're having to fork out literally thousands of dollars more simply for choosing some of Australia's most popular vehicles, like a Toyota RAV4, including the hybrid, or the Ford Ranger, all because the government is trying to force you into buy an electric vehicle. And if you want to buy an electric vehicle, that is your choice. But if you choose to buy a vehicle that is not a hybrid or is not a diesel, that is your choice and it should be restored. Now, all of this has happened in a very quick period of time, in just 2 years. Paul Keating famously said that when governments change, the country changes. Prime Minister Albanese and his government have changed our country. But as so many Australians can attest to, not for the better. You, your family, your children and our country can't afford another 3 years of this government. I know how to make decisions to get our country back on track. And tonight I will remind Australians of the Coalition's economic plan to lower your cost of living and restore confidence to our economy. I will also outline several policies which Australians can expect from a Coalition government under my leadership. Policies to get power bills down and to shore up our nation's future energy security. Policies to help alleviate our housing crisis and revive the great Australian dream of home ownership. Policies to improve workforce participation and health services, and policies to make our communities, our society and our country better and safer. But first, Mr Speaker, I'll respond to the Treasurer's budget from Tuesday night. As I've said previously, we're an opposition which supports good policy and stands against bad policy. Since Labor formed government, we've backed more than 180 bills which have passed this parliament. But we've opposed some bills where Labor and the Greens have collaborated to pass legislation which is not in our country's best interests. Just as we endorsed some sensible measures in Labor's first two budgets, we do the same for its third budget. In particular, the $3.4 billion for medicines on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme and the extension of emergency payments to support women and children fleeing domestic violence, which the Coalition first established in 2021. In my 22 years in Parliament, I've seen good and bad budgets, but the budget handed down on Tuesday night is one of the most irresponsible I've seen. Inflation is a huge problem for Australia. On comparative inflation, Australia is worse than the US, Singapore, Germany, Spain, Japan, the Netherlands, Italy, South Korea, Canada, France and the entire euro area. The reason interest rates have gone up 12 times is because the government can't control its spending and because of its reckless energy policy. In 3 Labor budgets, the government has lifted spending by a staggering $315 billion, or $30,000 per Australian household. The Reserve Bank Governor has sounded the alarm on inflation being homegrown, and she's exactly right. In the last 48 hours, every credible economist has issued scathing assessments of this budget because Labor has us in an inflationary hole and is still digging. And make no mistake, any further interest rate increases that fuel inflation now will continue also to rest squarely on the shoulders of this Prime Minister and Treasurer. Magic pudding spending and $13.7 billion on corporate welfare for billionaires doesn't help the economy or make your life easier. Let's also be clear about Labor's $300 energy rebate, which will cost the economy $3.5 billion. We will support this relief because we know Australians are hurting. But the government is treating the symptom, not the disease. Labor's renewable-only policy is the reason your power bills continue to skyrocket. Here's some facts which show the troubling state of our economy. More than 16,000 businesses around the country have gone insolvent since the 1st of July 2022. Behind each of those is a family who may have lost their home but certainly have lost their savings. Productivity has plunged by 5.4% on this government's watch, and household buying power has gone down by 7.5%, which you feel every time you go to the supermarket. Last year, Australians suffered the biggest increase in average tax rates of any citizens in the developed world. There's been double-digit increases for your essentials like electricity, gas, milk, bread and rent. And tragically, so many more Australians are living in cars and tents. And because of spending in this budget, the economic outlook is one of deficits as far as the eye can see. To alleviate cost of living pressures, we need to get inflation down. To get our economy back on track, we need a back-to-basics economic plan. And that's what a coalition government will deliver. First, we will rein in inflationary spending to take the pressure off inflation. As a start, we will not spend $13.7 billion on corporate welfare for green hydrogen and critical minerals. Yeah. These projects should stand up on their own without the need for taxpayers' money if they're worth the investment. Second, we will wind back Labor's intervention and remove regulatory roadblocks which are suffocating the economy and stopping businesses from getting ahead. For example, we will not force large firms to spend more than $1 billion a year policing the emissions of every small business they deal with, as Labor is trying to do. We will condense approval processes and cut back on Labor's red tape, which is killing mining, jobs and entrepreneurialism. Only yesterday, Santos indicated it will have to let 200 employees go because of slow project approvals. I want mining to boom in Western Australia and around the nation. More mining means more revenue. More revenue means more roads and less congestion, more schools and more hospitals. A turbocharged West Australian economy means more national prosperity. And we don't need to give out billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to get mining projects started. Third, we will remove the complexity and hostility of Labor's industrial relations agenda, which is putting unreasonable burdens on businesses. For example, we'll revert to the former coalition government's simple definition of a casual worker and create certainty for our 2.5 million small businesses. Fourth, we will provide lower, simpler and fairer taxes for all, because Australians should keep more of what they earn. And you'll hear more about our tax plan ahead of the election. Fifth, we'll deliver competition policy which gives consumers and small businesses a fair go, not lobbyists and big corporations. And sixth, we will ensure Australians have more affordable and reliable energy. Mr Speaker, our economic plan, with its tried and tested principles, will restore competitiveness and rebuild economic confidence. Small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities. I've run a small business, as many of my colleagues have. Unlike most Labor parliamentarians, the Coalition understands small businesses. Tonight, I announce that we will extend the value of assets eligible for the instant asset write-off to $30,000 and make this ongoing for small businesses. Yeah. This will simplify depreciation for millions of small businesses by cutting red tape, boosting investment in productive assets, lowering business costs and prices, and driving productivity in the economy. Mr Speaker, a respected senior journalist recently wrote that energy is not part of the economy, it is the economy. And the government's renewables-only policy continues to drive up power prices. Electricity and gas prices have gone up 18% and 25% respectively under this government. You can see this rise in your household power bills. But the energy bills of farmers, of businesses and manufacturers have also skyrocketed. And that means the cost to make anything from food to furniture has also gone up. And that's why you're paying more at the supermarket and at the shops. If energy is not affordable or reliable, more manufacturers will simply shut up shop, they'll move offshore, we lose the jobs and the economic productivity, and we'll just re-import the products at a higher price. That's Labor's formula at the moment. And that's why there's been a threefold increase in the number of manufacturers who have closed their doors over the last 2 years. And for all of the government's talk about a future made in Australia, their current approach has no chance if energy isn't cheap and consistent and comparable to other competitive nations. Renewables have a role to play in our energy system, of course they do, but we can't rely on weather-dependent energy alone. We need power 24/7, especially for our hospitals, for our factories and freezers that need to operate around the clock. Now, concerningly, the government's renewables-only policy will see 90% of that 24/7 power switched off over the next decade. So it's a fair question to ask, how are things progressing for the government's plan for 5 gigawatts of renewables per year? Well, last year, 1.3 gigawatts were committed, almost 75% off target. Another Chris Bowen special. Rewiring our country will cost at least $1.3 trillion. Now, who will bear that cost? It will be you and your family, it will be farmers, it will be manufacturers, and it will be other businesses. So if you think you're paying higher prices for power today, they will only get much higher under a renewables-only rollout under this government. Our nation has 3 energy goals: cheaper power, consistent power and cleaner power. And we won't achieve these goals under Labor's renewables-only policy. But we can achieve all 3. And we can do that by showing the leadership and following the top 20 economies of the world, which are using zero-emission nuclear power or are taking steps to put it into the mix. Australia is the only one of the top 20 economies in the world not to do so. And by ramping up domestic gas production for affordable and reliable energy in the more immediate term, we can help keep the lights on and push power prices down. After 2 years of interventions into the gas market, skyrocketing prices and repeated warnings of shortfalls, Labor's new gas strategy is just words on paper. There's little chance of Labor bringing new gas supply into the system because it's ideologically opposed to gas and it's more worried about winning votes from the Greens in inner-city seats than it is worried about people living in suburbs or in regional towns around the country. Unlike Labor, a coalition government will speed up approvals, unlock gas in key basins like the Beetaloo, defund the Environmental Defender's Office, which is halting vital projects through lawfare, ensure gas is delivered to where it's needed by reinstating the National Gas Infrastructure Plan and commit to an annual release of offshore acreage for exploration and development in the Northern Territory and Western Australia. On nuclear power, some 50 countries are exploring or investing into zero-emission, next-generation technologies for the very first time. We hold the largest deposits of uranium on the planet. You have to ask yourself the question, does the Prime Minister and Minister Chris Bowen have it right? Or is the rest of the developed world just doesn't know what they're talking about? I mean, ask yourself that question. Would you side with Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen or the rest of the developed world? It's a fair question, and I think most Australians know the answer to it. The government have ordered nuclear-powered submarines, so it raises a reasonable question: why is the technology safe for our submariners but unsafe for our citizens? Because of nuclear power, residents in Ontario, Canada, pay up to a quarter of the cost of what some Australians pay for electricity. With nuclear power, we can maximise the highest yield of energy per square metre and minimise our environmental damage. We do that by putting new nuclear technologies on or near the brownfield sites of decommissioned or retiring coal-fired power plants using the existing grid. There's no need for all of the proposed 58 million solar panels, almost 3,500 wind farms and 28,000 kilometres of new transmission poles and wires. Bob Hawke was a strong Labor leader who strongly supported nuclear power, as does John Howard, along with the Australian Workers' Union and many others who have a vision for the future of our country, including some 65% of Australians aged 18 to 34 years of age. Making Australia a nuclear-powered nation is right for our country and will secure a future of cheaper, consistent and cleaner electricity. We need the right policy for you and for our nation. Mr Speaker, beyond Labor's energy crisis, we're also facing a Labor-created housing crisis. The great Australian aspiration of home ownership has become out of reach for so many. Now, it's wonderful that parents, in some circumstances with financial means, can help their kids into a home. But I will never accept a situation where the only people who can afford to buy a home in our country are those with the support of their parents. The Coalition has already committed, and we tonight recommit, to allowing Australians to access up to $50,000 of their super to buy their first home, and extended this policy to separated women to help restart their lives. The money initially withdrawn from super will need to be returned when the house is sold to support retirement, and in most cases it will be with an uplift that will see retirement even more secure. But there's more that we need to do. For almost 20 years I've chaired my local Salvation Army Red Shield appeal. 2 weeks ago at our annual fundraising breakfast, I heard a heartbreaking account of a man in his 70s having to live in his car. It is such a soul-destroying experience. It's sad, but it is not an uncommon story, and it's one that I've heard at Food Bank and at many places around our great country. Australians are struggling to find homes to rent and buy, and it's not always due to a lack of money. Amidst this housing crisis, Labor is bringing in 1.67 million migrants over 5 years, more than the population of Adelaide, in 5 years. We celebrate the contributions of migrants over many decades. We're a great country because of what they've helped to build, and the great Australian achievement of modern Australia is something that we celebrate every day. But by getting the migration policy settings right, the Coalition can free up more houses for Australians. Now, the Prime Minister has promised to build 1.2 million homes by 2029, but on the government's current trajectory, they will fall short by 400,000 homes, or 33%. The Prime Minister is making the housing crisis much, much worse, and Australians need homes now. We're at an 11-year low of building approvals. To help Australians into homes, we need to make sure that we prioritise them for existing homes, the homes that have already been built. The other impact Australians are feeling from the Albanese government's poor management of the migration program is from congestion on our roads and pressure on our existing services, which are stretched, like trying to get in to see a GP. Tonight I announce several measures a coalition government will implement to meet our housing crisis head-on by alleviating pressure on the housing market. We believe that by rebalancing the migration program and taking decisive action on the housing crisis, the Coalition can free up almost 40,000 additional homes in the first year and well over 100,000 homes in the first 5 years. First, we will implement a 2-year ban on foreign investors and temporary residents purchasing existing homes in Australia. Yeah. Secondly, we will reduce the permanent migration program by 25% from 185,000 to 140,000 for the first 2 years in recognition of the urgency of the crisis. The program will then increase to 150,000 in Year 3 and 160,000 in Year 4. We will ensure there are enough skilled and temporary skilled visas for those with building and construction skills to support our local tradies to build the homes and the units that we need across the country. Similarly, we will return the refugee and humanitarian program planning to 13,750, closer to the longer-term average. The humanitarian program will remain one of the most generous in the world on a per capita basis. Third, we will reduce excessive numbers of foreign students studying at metropolitan universities to relieve stress on rental markets in our major cities. We will work with universities to put in place a cap on foreign students, and we will enhance the integrity of the student visa program by introducing a tiered approach to increasing the student visa application fee and applying it to foreign students who change providers. Now, the usual CEOs and some of the big businesses may not like this approach, but my priority is to restoring the great Australian home ownership dream. Yeah. Mr Speaker, while reducing migration numbers to ease pressure on housing, the Coalition government will encourage thousands of people to engage more in the labour market. We recommit to increasing the amount that older Australians and veterans can work without reducing pension payments if they choose to do so, if it's right for them. We will double the existing work bonus, $300 per fortnight, to $600. It's estimated that this will benefit over 80,000 pensioners and veterans who choose to work. We'll look to further expand the work bonus arrangements beyond this commitment in consultation with older Australians and veterans and in consideration of labour market conditions prevailing at the time. Pensioners will continue to accrue unused pension work bonus amounts up to a maximum of $11,800, which can exempt future earnings from the pension income test. We'll also lift the number of hours that those on student visas can work by 12 hours a fortnight. Mr Speaker, amidst our cost of living crisis created by Labor, people's health and wellbeing are suffering. That's why we committed to restoring the number of Medicare subsidised psychological sessions from 10 to 20 and on a permanent basis. As Health Minister, I increased hospital funding year on year. I also established the $20 billion Medical Research Future Fund, which to this day provides billions of dollars to medical research projects. Indeed, when I became Health Minister in 2013, we inherited a bulk billing rate from Labor of 73% and increased it to 84%. When we left government, bulk billing was 88.5%. What Labor tried to hide in its budget, and a figure that wasn't mentioned by the Treasurer, is that bulk billing has decreased under Labor to 77%, an 11% drop. Always look at what Labor does, not what they say they will do. Mr Speaker, the health of all Australians, particularly given our ageing society, is always a priority for the Coalition. Last year, I committed to an investment in best practice for women's health issues, including endometriosis. Tonight, I welcome the government's commitment of $50 million in this budget for longer consultations for endometriosis and pelvic pain. The Coalition will continue to support measures for women's health, particularly in primary care settings. More needs to be done to support women's health, including for menopause and perimenopause. We will continue to develop and support good policy to this end. We'll work with the RACGP, AMA and other stakeholders who want to see more support for women in our community. Concerningly, Australia is facing a looming shortage of GPs, some 11,000 by 2031. We need more GPs, especially in our suburbs and in our regional areas. Junior doctors who enter general practice earn about 3/4 of the salary of their counterparts in hospitals. Working with the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners and the Australian Medical Association, the Coalition Government will invest $400 million to provide junior doctors who train in general practice with incentive payments, assistance with leave entitlements and support for pre-vocational training. We'll also make sure that we support better outcomes for Indigenous Australians through the health system. Led by Senators Little and Ambajimpa Price, we will provide practical solutions to improve education, health and safety outcomes for Indigenous women and children, especially in our most disadvantaged remote communities. Mr Speaker, in recent times, under this government, our nation has been rocked by many shocking and tragic events. The stabbings at Bondi were truly horrific, where 6 people were murdered. Knife attacks on a bishop in Western Sydney and a man in Perth radicalised youth. Incidents reinforcing the enduring threat of extreme Islamism. 28 women killed in violent circumstances this year alone. More than 150 hardcore criminals, including murderers and sex offenders, released from immigration detention into the community by the Albanese government, with some already having reoffended. And since Hamas's barbaric terrorist attack on Israel, a 700% increase in anti-Semitic incidents on our soil. Australians are unsettled by crime on our streets, ruptures to our social cohesion and threats to our national security. The Coalition Government will provide much-needed leadership in tackling knife crime. We will work with states and territories to develop uniform knife laws across all jurisdictions, laws which will give police the powers to stop and search using detector wands like Queensland's Jack's Law, and laws which will limit and restrict the sale and possession of knives to minors and dangerous individuals. Mr Speaker, as a former police officer, the horrific scenes of beaten women and distraught children I encountered stay with me to this day, as do the memories of taking women who were shaking with fear to shelters and safe homes and helping them relocate with their children to safety. And it's why I've dedicated much of my career to protecting women and children. It's why, as Home Affairs Minister, I established the $70 million Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation and recommit to doubling its size. Recently, Molly Ticehurst, a 28-year-old mother from New South Wales, was murdered because her violent ex-partner was on bail. Our bail laws need to be tightened in this country, and under a coalition government that I lead, they will be tightened. Offences relating to partner and family violence generally fall under state and territory legislation, but there is also a role for the Commonwealth to play. A coalition government will make it an offence to use mobile phones and computer networks to cause an intimate partner or family member fear for their personal safety, to track them using spyware, or to engage in coercive behaviours. We will toughen the bail laws and apply to these new Commonwealth offences. Mr Speaker, I've been a Minister for Immigration and Home Affairs. They are demanding but rewarding jobs. I granted thousands of visas to sick children, to parents with medical conditions, to victims of sexual assault and refugees who have gone on to become wonderful Australians. The public rarely hears about that side of the job. But in those roles, you also need to make tough decisions. I cancelled more than 6,300 visas of dangerous non-citizen criminals, with a priority on those committing sexual offences against women and children, driven by my desire to make sure that they don't harm any further Australians. If a minister doesn't have the backbone to do that, they're letting our country and our citizens down. I made our country and our citizens safer, and as Prime Minister, I will do it again. Mr Speaker, it will take a coalition government once again to stop the people smugglers and to deport criminals. It will also take a coalition government to turn the tide of anti-Semitism afflicting our country. Anti-Semitism is not just a threat to one segment of our community. It's a threat to our social cohesion and to our democratic values. Some of the most strident anti-Semitic standard bearers have come from our university campuses. We will also provide the moral and political leadership which makes it abundantly clear that we expect the law to be enforced readily, not reluctantly, against those inciting hatred and violence. Mr Speaker, tackling crime in our community also means doing the same online. There's been an uptick in young Australians committing filming and uploading. There's been an uptick in young Australians committing crimes where they're filming and uploading their crimes to social media. The coalition government will make it an offence to post criminal acts online. Those convicted will be banned from using digital platforms and liable for up to 2 years imprisonment. As a father of 3 children who all grew up in the digital age, I'm troubled by the material our children are exposed to. And that's why I announced in my budget reply last year that a coalition government will ban gambling advertising during the broadcasting of sporting games. However, I'm more worried by the criminal dark underbelly of the internet. At the fingertips of our children is a concerning volume of sexually explicit and violent material, as well as content designed to indoctrinate. We welcome the government's belated decision to back our policy for an age verification trial. But unlike Labor, a coalition government will include social platforms like Instagram and TikTok in such a trial. Mr Speaker, authoritarian regimes like China, Russia, Iran and North Korea are emboldened. They're expanding their militaries, they're conducting cyber attacks and engaging in foreign interference. The Prime Minister and his deputy rightly say that we're living in the most precarious period since the Second World War, a view echoed by our intelligence agencies and our allies. Strenuous efforts are needed to maintain peace and to deter acts of aggression, like those recently aimed at our Navy and Air Force. The 1930s taught us nothing else. It was that appeasement and weakness of leadership do not end well. In this critical period of risk, I will offer our country strong leadership backed by significant investment into the Defence Forces. Labor's priorities are clearly wrong and, frankly, dangerous. The government has announced an additional 36,000 public servants in this budget, costing Australian taxpayers $24 billion over 4 years. The Coalition sees areas like defence as much more a priority than office staff in Canberra, given the precarious times in which we live and threats in our region. We will reprioritise Canberra-centric funding and make an additional investment into defence to rapidly enhance the capability of our men and women in uniform. We're working with leaders in defence industry to identify projects and investments that can be made in Australia to keep us safe in an uncertain world. Mr Speaker, I want to say to every Australian tonight that my vision is to get our country back on track, to make your life easier, to make us safe and secure again. The job of the Prime Minister is to be strong, not weak, to be fair and firm, to be compassionate and definite, to unite, not divide, especially through referendums. As each day passes, this government increasingly shows how disconnected it is from the views, the values and the vision of everyday Australians. Labor has forgotten the main principle of governing. It isn't the people who serve the will of the government. It is the government who serves the will of the people. I came to this parliament having served my community as a police officer and as a successful small business owner employing 40 people. I've had the honour of serving Australians on the front bench since 2004 in many portfolios under 4 Prime Ministers. My team and I have the experience to get our country back on track and to support everyday Australians. We live in the greatest country in the world. But at the moment, Australia and Australians are being held back. Australians are being left behind and they feel it. They're being left behind by this weak Labor government who has the wrong priorities. And our country deserves so much more. Ask yourself this question. Are you better off today than you were 2 years ago? Do you feel safer or more secure than you did 2 years ago? When governments change, the country changes. Australians can't afford another 3 years of the Albanese Labor government. At the next election, it will be a time for change. A better change for you, for your family and for our country. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.